All right, so we're going to talk a little bit, just a brief introduction of FEP and who we are. So Milady's going to talk about that in just a moment.
So we are the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership. We were created to promote financial education, and our model is to provide professional development to educators to prepare them and build their confidence. Studies show that most educators are not feeling very confident to teach financial education. So to promote that learning, that teaching rather, that's the approach. One of the approaches that we've taken is to provide professional development for educators. We also focus on identifying equitable learning resources for financial education. We are administratively housed in OSPI. And what am I missing anything, Amy? I think I covered all the big ones.
All right, fantastic. So just a brief introduction to us as a public-private partnership. We are we've been around for a while, and we're here. We're hoping to expand our presence in Washington State as we've expanded our staff to provide everyone with the teachers and students with the resources they need to increase financial literacy among our K-12 students. So just a couple housekeeping items here. If you haven't yet, and if you just joined us, please join the Mentimeter below using a phone or another tab
camera me so I can be on
your
camera
computer. And we also have the slides. This is going to be the interactive component of the webinar. So we'd love to have you join us on there. These slides and resources, as I mentioned earlier, this presentation is going to be very resource heavy. You're going to receive a lot of implementable.
Yes, please.
Linda, I'm just going to go ahead and mute you for a second. We have a lot of resources that we've developed and put together for you here to use. And so I would really like to invite you to just let this wave of knowledge crash over you. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed or just overwhelmed in general. But we have a lot of things to present here for you, and we will make sure they all get to your hands by next week. And then Linda's going to talk a little bit about our clock hours.
Sorry about the musical chairs that we're playing with our tech issues, but I think we've got it nailed. So I am Linda Gallivan. I am the program assistant for FEP, and I've been here for a little over 3 years. Clock hours, which is what I'm going to talk to you about. I am out of the office tomorrow, so on Monday I will be going into PD Enroller, and I will be marking the attendance. PD Enroller will send you an automated eval link. You have to complete that evaluation in order for you to receive the clock hours for this training. This training is eligible for 2 clock hours, and that is as easy as it comes. Amy, were we planning on sending a FEP eval from Tracy's email after the training as well on top of? Okay.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, perfect. So we only asked just a couple of questions. We want to know about your interest and what you learned and what you would also like to see from us, what we can offer you and how we can support you in your school and in your district. So please look for those 2 emails on Monday. And that's all that I have.
Thank you so much, Linda. All right, so let's go ahead and dig in. Let's get started. Let's talk about financial education and social emotional learning. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our state standards. We actually do have state financial education standards, and we're going to look at these and see how they connect and interweave within the social emotional learning standards that I imagine you are familiar with. One thing I just want to say here really quick about our approach to financial education. A lot of people may hear, oh, that we have standards, and they may think that our approach is to put another set of standards, another item on the to-do list of teachers. And we are really not trying to add anything more to anyone's plate, particularly in the K-5 space. Like I said, I've been there. I know how full that plate is. So our approach is really cross-curricular. We're looking at ways that you can integrate financial education as your real-world examples, your success criteria, or your learning outcomes for other important subject areas, such as social emotional learning. And so that's really what we're going to dig into today. I imagine that since you are here in the social emotional learning professional development, that I don't have to sit here and try to convince you of the importance of social emotional learning. That we can all just acknowledge it. Social emotional development is going to show incredible gains in all areas of student life when we start implementing this universal school-based SEL programs. The challenge is that SEL is still very new, right? I mean, Castle coined this term in 1997. It's been around the last decade that it's really picked up steam in the education space. And that coincides with when Washington State really started developing their set of standards as well. So it's new. SEL is having a moment. I think we can all agree SEL is having a moment right now. And financial literacy is really having a moment as well. It's starting to come to the forefront. People are starting to see the value in this explicit and equitable distribution of financial knowledge. So give us all sort of the leg up when it comes to taking on post-secondary debt and things like that. One thing that we absolutely know is that employers, our kids are going to have jobs of the future, jobs we can't even predict yet in some ways. And employers say that these social emotional skills are equal to or more important than technical skills. And I mention that because employment and income is kind of the easy way. It's a great entryway into personal finance and financial education, right? We can't talk about our finances unless we're generating income. So there's one way that just kind of shows you this natural connection between these two subject areas. And we're going to keep dividing into that or digging into that connection with our next couple of slides. Within Washington State, we know we have the state Washington SEL standards you see over there on the left. We are developing a really wonderful, mutually beneficial relationship with the SEL department at OSPI. They've been incredibly supportive of our work as we've kind of gone in this direction, looking at how connected these social emotional skills and personal finance skills are. Within the state context, what I really love about the SEL department at OSPI is they have these 4 guiding principles of equity, cultural responsiveness, trauma-informed practice, and universal design. These are all fundamentally incredibly important to the core of our work here at FEP as well. We have a dedication to our historically underserved student populations. And so I'm going to put a little plug in here. If you work with special populations or you have a special interest in any of these guiding principles because of your students you serve, we are going to be doing a special populations and financial education webinar in July that Milady will be leading, that we would love to see you at.